This lesson is going to be about CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Previously with HTML, you mix the formatting and the content. The older standards 4.01 of HTML in the 90s, you typically formatted by formatting in the HTML using different tags and so forth. This became very difficult to maintain, especially with larger websites, in just a bad way. So now we always separate presentation and content, and so content is what we put in the HTML files. We structure it all nicely, but we present and style HTML files with CSS. A little bit of the background, this is with CSS. This lesson is going to present three things: the syntax of CSS, the actual placement of where you can refer to CSS in three different places, and then explain a little bit about the cascading part of the name, how things override and run together, cascade together. So the syntax, if we see I have two files here, an HTML file and a CSS file. The CSS file is where we're going to put our CSS code. Here is the syntax. As you can see, it's an external file, and we've just named it .css instead of .html. The syntax for CSS, you write the name of the tag. Here I've written the name body. You could put p or div or h1 or whatever tag you want to format. Then you use curly brackets to group the commands for that specific tag. And then you alternate the attribute with a colon and then the actual value you're giving to that attribute, and then a semicolon to separate each. And so you just list all the different commands for that particular. And this says that all these things are going to apply to that body tag. And then you can repeat these as many times as you need. This is the external CSS. If I jump over into the HTML file, the placement, the external, you have to import it into this document, and you do that with the link tag. I talked about this in the lecture about the head tag. And you use the href attribute to point out the name of the file. You see example 1, it's the exact name of this one, example 1 CSS. So now we've imported it into this HTML document. The benefit with this external CSS, and this is absolutely the most common way to use CSS, is that you can link in your CSS and styles into many different HTML documents. The second way to format an HTML file is to use the style tag also in the head. And here the syntax is exactly the same. Inside the style tag, you simply list the different commands, just as we did in the external one. In this case, I say that the P tag is going to have the font style of italic and the color yellow. The final way is to use the style attribute in a specific tag. Once again, I use the P tag and affect the style attribute, and this is called inline CSS. Regarding cascading, how these things run together, the question you might ask yourself here is which one of these apply to the P tag? And of course, they have different priorities. So the inline is the highest priority. If you provide a style command in the actual tag, it overrides the others. And then the second priority is the internal style tag, and then lastly, the external. So if we look at what should happen, we see that the body should be bold text, 40 pixels, very big, and purple, and aligned left. But that applies to everything except for the P tag, because we override here in the internal CSS. It has higher priority. So P tags should have italics in yellow. That should apply for all P tags. But in this case, we say that this last P tag should be green. And so we see how all the things run together. And so if we look at the actual file here, that's the case. Everything's purple. Everything's 40 pixels in size, as we had stated in the body. Those we don't change anywhere, but that first P tag I say should be yellow and italics, and it is. But then the second P tag, I override that once again, but it only overrides the color because I didn't say anything about the italics. So it's still italics, as I said here, and both italics override what I said for the body, which was bold, but then it's green instead of yellow. Hopefully you can see that style sheets are very powerful. You can change the appearance in any way imaginable, basically, but it's also rather complex. So take the time to download the code and experiment with style sheets, with placement, the syntax, and how cascading works.